Oh, hello, and a Merry Christmas to you all. We finished James for the last one. Well, we did the virgin birth after that, but we finished James. So, what we're going to do is look at the prophet Habakkuk. It's a very short prophecy. It's 3 chapters. It's one of the minor prophets. It's one of my favourites. It's also one which is given particular importance in the New Testament. Paul especially likes Habakkuk, particularly in chapter 2, which we'll come to all in good time, not today. And it's quite interesting. It's built around 2 complaints. Things are occurring. Habakkuk, we don't know the precise date of Habakkuk, but it was 570, 580 BC, something like that. Have I got that right? I think so. Maybe I've got it wrong. I don't know. It was Babylon was the dominant nation, and in a few years' time, they would conquer Jerusalem, destroy Jerusalem, and destroy the temple. So it's a number of years before that. But Judah itself and Jerusalem, they were in a terrible state. There was corruption in the courts. There was oppression and exploitation of the poor. Sexual immorality was rife. The people, many of them, and religious leaders, worshipped idols. There was very little real love for God. Various people would use God's name and claim to be acting on God's behalf or praying to God. But in reality, most of the people, and in particular most of the leaders, had forgotten God and had no time for God and no time for justice, no time for helping the poor. They were in it for themselves. You might see some similarities with our society, or the West in general. But what happens is this: Habakkuk complains. He has 2 complaints, and we get God's response. And perhaps most importantly, we get the change in Habakkuk. You see, in the Bible, there are 2 things. There are those who complain about God, and those who complain to God. Now, complaining about God is a very dangerous thing to do. You're in big trouble if you're doing that. The prime example of that is the Israelites. They groaned and moaned their way through the wilderness, through the desert, after they came out of Egypt. They just complained the whole time. God did various miracles at various times. They carried on complaining. And as a result, hardly any of them entered the promised land. Joshua and Caleb, and I think their families as well, maybe 1 or 2 others, entered the promised land of those who had originally come out of Egypt. Most of the rest died in the desert. And they did not believe God. So complaining about God is a dangerous thing to do. It is a symptom of something being seriously wrong. But there are also lots of examples in the Bible of those who complain to God. Abraham complained to God. Moses did. David did. A number of his psalms he's complaining to God. The prime example is Job. You've got a whole book, a manual if you like, on complaining to God. Jeremiah complained to God. And here we've got Habakkuk. And so complaining to God is something that God can cope with. He can handle it. But so it's something in a sense we should not be afraid of doing. But we need to realise that it's not God who's going to change. It's not God who needs to change. God is perfect. He is perfectly holy. He is perfect in wisdom. He is perfect in goodness. Everything is worked out perfectly. We often can't understand or see it, but God is perfect. We are none of those things. So, if we go and complain to God, it is my mind, my emotions, your mind, your emotions that will change. And that's the best thing that can happen to us. And that's what we'll see here in Habakkuk. We'll see he starts off being frustrated with God, frustrated with what he sees and what he doesn't see. But through this, his heart and his mind changes. So that's what we're going to see when we start to work through the book of Habakkuk.